The bonus surprise week continues. I thought I'd throw a few extra shows in for you all. So we're back again today. And there goes Hurricane Nigel, still on our satellite picture out there in the Atlantic, but we're just about done with that. It's being picked up by the prevailing westerlies. And we're in the very last days of summer. Autumn is right around the corner. That will be early Saturday morning at 1:50 a.m. Central Time. Well, we can start out with the satellite imagery. One important thing in meteorology is to know what kind of image you're looking at. This is going to be visible imagery, and we can tell that because there's a lot of granular detail on these cloud fields, especially the cumulus. They show up very well. In infrared, you're not really going to see those. For example, in Ontario, cumulus clouds developing. However, if we switch over to the infrared, we don't see those. So visible imagery is definitely preferred. So just to compare and contrast that, there's the visible imagery. Let's switch over to infrared. That definitely places emphasis on the mid and upper level clouds. And if we use an enhancement scheme, which is basically just mapping some of this white and gray to different colors, it's going to look like this. So that definitely helps bring out detail in some of the convective clouds. Like right there, you can see there's some aggressive convection there in northern Nebraska, and also with that new tropical cyclone coming together. And if you compare that to the grayscale, you can see why that enhancement is so important. It really brings out detail. Now there's also the water vapor imagery. This is a little bit different, and this helps us kind of see the circulations and some of the different air masses as well. You can see the very dry air right here. That's the dry punch flowing in from the Pacific across the southwestern U.S. And there we have the cold core low, center of the circulation right there over Oregon, so we can pretty much pinpoint exactly where the center of that storm is. And there's the AWIPS graphics for the 700 millibar chart. You can see both on the height field, the black lines, and the wind plots that the center of the circulation is right there near Burns, Oregon. That's pretty close to where it was on the satellite imagery. And here's the latest on the visible satellite imagery. This area around Nebraska, northwestern Kansas, is under a slight risk. There's a boundary right there from just south of North Platte into Kansas. That's probably a dry line segment. And there's also some evidence of an outflow boundary that's going to be right in here. North of that, transverse bands, stratocumulus and stratus. South of that, more of a congested look. We're not looking at these things right there. Those are convective cells. We're looking at the low cloud field right in here. And it's got more of a clumpy texture, maybe some elements suggesting streets, like in here. So definitely a lot different from that flatter appearance up to the north. And of course some clearing as you go to the west, as you get away from that low-level moisture axis. And there's the surface map for that same area. Definitely some dynamic weather, upslope, winds gusting to 25, 30 miles an hour, and that outflow boundary. Yeah, that's going to be roughly in here. All right, so yeah, something like that. North of that, temperatures around 70 to 74, dew points around 60, and down to the south, 80s. Much warmer, and a little bit more of a southerly component to the wind flow. You can see that convergence right there. And this little storm right here, it could pick up the boundary, and that has prospects for continued severe weather this afternoon, and there could be more development down to the south. But yeah, that's going to be the dry line right there, 49-degree dew point there at Colby, and 61 at Hill City. So this whole warm sector, that's got potential as well. But some of the higher storm elevation felicities are found along and just north of the boundary. So we can go to the SPC experimental page, go to the mesoanalysis graphics, and look at Kansas and Nebraska. And we look at that wind flow. But we also get a little bit of help from the divergence and vorticity product. And this gives us an idea where to look for boundaries. Now the red lines, those are indicating areas of convergence focused on southwestern Nebraska right there. And the hatched shading, like this stuff right here, that's higher low-level vorticity. Both of those useful for finding features, boundaries, and other areas. Most of the boundaries are going to be co-located with the higher convergence values, and pressure falls, strong mesolows, that kind of thing, those are a little bit more co-located with the higher vorticity values. So both of those are integral to a complete weather picture. And speaking about that weather picture, here's the national map. This is not going to focus so much on the mesoscale, but this is more of a broad synoptic scale picture. And we see the polar front up to the north. That's been there for a couple days, gradually oozing to the southeast. We've also got the dry line co-located with that severe weather from a triple point near Rapid City, stretching down to North Platte, Dodge City, Amarillo, and around Pecos. And we've also got that little stagnating frontal boundary from the Atlantic through Florida. That's also been there a while as well. NHC is focusing on potential Tropical Cyclone 16, and that may become Tropical Storm Ophelia in the next couple days. Not too sure about this one. This could beat it and become Ophelia, and if so, this would be Philippe. So one of the two, that's the name we're going to be looking at. But this is going to have effects in North Carolina and Virginia by tomorrow night. And this is developing on that frontal boundary, so it is going to be a little bit baroclinic in nature, and it will transition as it moves north. However, for the most part, it is going to be tropical in nature. It's going to be a tropical storm. And then gradually, as it moves up into this cooler air, we're going to see the thermal characteristics start transitioning over. All right, heading out west, you can see a triple point there around Wichita Falls down to Dallas. This is an area of concern for this afternoon. There's a SPC slight risk for DFW up to Durant, Ardmore, Wichita Falls, and Lake Texoma. There could be a few downburst storms, some hail, but we're not really looking at much in the way of tornado potential. And heading out west, not too much going on, but there are red flag warnings in the Sacramento Valley of California. Winds up to 35 miles an hour. And then heading up into the northwest, cold air is in place. We see 40s. And in the higher elevations, above 7,500 feet, we're looking for 2 to 5 inches of snow accumulation. And there could be some locally heavy snow as well around Yellowstone National Park on up towards Butte and Bozeman. And that's going to be up above 9,000 feet. Could be 6 to 10 inches of snow above that level. Freeze warnings in effect for Wyoming, right in here. Temperatures going down to 25 degrees around Jackson Hole, Big Piney, and Kemmerer. Some big weather going on in the Salt Lake City area as that cold front advances to the east. Those are convective storms all the way up north into eastern Idaho. Additional cells all the way down towards Elko, Nevada. A little bit unusual, especially for this time of year. Let's take a look at the radar. And there it is, scattered to broken showers and storms all the way down through Salt Lake City. Some of these do have thunder, and they are producing heavy precipitation all the way down through the Salt Lake City area, Dugway Proving Ground, through the Bonneville Salt Flats, somewhere in here, and on out of radar range. Okay. Heading up north into Alaska, continued cold. They're on the backside of this system, thermal trough extending down from the Chukchi Sea. Temperatures in the 30s for the most part, and some snow from the Brooks Range on up into the Arctic Ocean. Canada also looking pretty typical for this time of year, 20s and 30s, with some snow appearing on the weather charts. And then down south, we've got that wildfire smoke from Yellowknife down to northern Alberta and into the Canadian prairies. Ontario putting out some air quality alerts for the western part of the province as this westerly flow behind this Hudson Bay system drives the smoke eastward. And some warm temperatures there around the Hudson Bay region in this warm sector up into the 70s. A little bit unusual for this time of year. And out there in the Maritimes, an outgoing frontal system, strong easterlies coming back in behind that, unstable and very showery. All right, so we've got that frontal system there in the Central Rockies and the Great Basin. How do we find that? Let's take a closer look at the surface plots. Well, using surface plots, the front can be notoriously difficult to find in the western parts of the U.S. Some clues I would look at: northwestern Colorado, 79, southwest winds. That indicates to me very warm air, probably the tropical sector. Up there in Idaho, much colder north winds, so that's part of the polar sector. So we're kind of narrowing it down, and I might go something like this. It appears those convective elements are back behind this front, which is consistent with a anafront, which is very common in the western U.S. And there's our front there, but sometimes these fronts are not so obvious. So what other tools do we have? Well, let's take a look at AWIPS. And of course, AWIPS is the workstation used in National Weather Service forecast offices, so you're seeing the real deal here. What we've got here, this is the 500 millibar winds, heights, temperature, and I'm going to find the mid-level jet. So it's going to be kind of right in there. Now, this rule of thumb I'm going to explain does not work all that great with these deeply closed upper level lows. We've got the upper level trough kind of in this area here, the upper level ridge sort of in here. And the rule of thumb is that along the jet, in between the upstream trough and downstream ridge, in fact, I might go with this for a ridge. Let's do that. We're going to find the surface cyclone in between, about halfway along the jet, so right in there. And then we're going to find the surface fronts extending maybe 30 degrees out from the jet, kind of like that, and the warm front like that. So that's a good starting location for finding your frontal systems. Now, this does differ a lot from what we have right now. The real front is back in here, so we can probably blame frictional effects over the mountains. That kind of checks the forward advance of that polar air mass. So there is going to be a little bit of a discrepancy there between the mid-level data and the surface indications. Now let's take a look at the other tool we have available. That's going to be the sea level pressure and thickness. Okay, so on this one we have to find our lows and highs ourselves. So let's do that real quick. Lows right there in the center of that 0, 0. Highs in the center of that 20, in the center of that 16. And that's going to be most of the closed lows and highs. Now you see we have red lines for thickness. We're going to find the fronts out ahead of that thickness gradient. So there's a very tight gradient right there moving through Salt Lake City. This is going to be 0Z. That's going to be a couple of hours from now, so things will have moved a little bit. But this gives us a good starting location for the front, right in there. And that seems to connect maybe, it gets very difficult to find going out east, but we're going to focus on the western U.S. So there it is. That's going to be the location of the front. And we can also apply that to our Tropical Cyclone 16 out there. Now that is a tropical system, but it is picking up that frontal boundary, so it's going to be kind of like that right there. That's that frontal boundary which has been draped across Florida over the past several days. All right, so anyway, let's take a look at the tropical forecast. This is where we're at this evening. Yep, things coming together right there. The vorticity shading showing a whole lot going on there north of the Bahamas, and there's our other system just west of the Cape Verde Islands, so keep an eye on that. I do know that the guidance on this has shifted a little bit further to the north, and it's slowed it down, and it's gotten picked up by this trough, and you're going to see that here as we roll forward. All right, going into early Saturday, there's our system there, 995 millibar low off of North Carolina, moving onshore. And here's our other system developed into a closed low. maybe becoming a tropical storm. And things move along. Then we're up to Monday, then Tuesday. And you can see that storm right there slowing down. And it's responding to an upper level trough in this area, which is going to lift it to the north. And that differs from the forecast that we had yesterday. And I did explain that anything a week out like that is crystal ball territory. And we could very well see additional errors in this model output. So we'll just kind of sit back and watch it over the weekend, and things should be fairly well locked down by Monday. So anyway, there's the scenario for next week. And yeah, look at that big polar high settling in across the eastern U.S. That's a definite pattern change. I'm going to go back a little bit. There it is. I just want to show you that high sinking south. Not only the high, but also the thermal troughing there over the Great Lakes. So all of that is cool air pushing down to the south. So a little bit of fall settling in. And that brings us up to the very end of the run with a deep hurricane out there in the Atlantic. Did that strike Bermuda? Bermuda is right there. And it looks like currently the model not forecasting any hits on Bermuda, but again, this is pretty far out. And we take a look at the NAM forecast. You can focus on your area of interest. There's also Tropical Cyclone 16 forming out there north of the Bahamas, and we roll that forward overnight into tomorrow morning and into tomorrow afternoon. So yeah, that system coming together, probably a named storm by that time. A couple of MCSs, showers, and convective activity there in the central U.S. More of it near that frontal system in the Dakotas and Montana. And then going into Saturday, we get the tropical cyclone coming on shore. Should be a tropical storm at that point, and then by Saturday evening, crossing over into Virginia. Meanwhile, the polar system comes out of the Rockies and the high plains into the Midwest. MCS moving eastward into Iowa, Missouri, and Minnesota. All right, let's take a look at the AWIPS chart sequence on this from the NAM. There is the tropical cyclone as we go into tonight and into tomorrow morning. That's going to be how things look around sunrise. It definitely has come together, almost certainly a tropical storm by this point, and it continues drifting to the north, intensifying, and this is going to be tomorrow evening, approaching Wilmington very closely. I think there's been a very slight westward jog on this, but this is going to be the overnight hours Friday night and into Saturday morning, moving inland, a huge spiral band going around the storm, and the eye wall expanding a little bit as the storm weakens. The wind field expands as well, and we go into the daytime hours on Saturday and into Saturday night. So that's how things look. By Sunday, most of this should be passing over Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York, and it will be a lot weaker. And we've got ourselves some activity out there in Nebraska. There's the current radar. This is focusing on the area south and southeast of North Platte. There's our strongest storm just west of McCook. This definitely looks like a hailer, and it's got a tornado warning on that for a radar-indicated tornado and reports of a funnel cloud. So we can zoom in on that really quickly, look at the velocity field, and I'm going to guess it's probably that couplet right there. So that's indeed going to be on the leading side of that storm right there. The inflow notch right in here. And we run the animation and see that is moving, looks like east-southeast, so pretty close to U.S. Highway 6. So this could be a problem for areas near and south of McCook. And then checking in on Texas on that other slight risk. Looks like a lot of disorganized activity. Don't see any indications of any severe cells right at this moment. The strongest cell, probably this one between Denison and Sherman. That's along US 75, and then we got the tail end storm, which looks like garbage at the moment. Probably some very impressive downdrafts coming out of that, but not really doing a whole lot as far as precipitation rates. And there are some boundaries out there down to the south, and you can see the cloud streets across the DFW area. That's co-located with the moisture supply flowing to the northwest. Also, the newest National Drought Monitor was released today. If you're in DFW, Austin, Houston, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, you're in an extreme to exceptional drought category. Also some problems up there in the Corn Belt. The yields so far have been so-so. In Iowa, they have exceeded expectations, but we're still at the beginning of the harvest. Also seeing some problems in the southwestern deserts right there around Tucson, Albuquerque, and in the Pacific Northwest. These areas may see some relief over the coming weeks, not so much out west, unfortunately. And that's all we have for this special edition of Forecast Lab. I do want to thank our supporters for helping to keep the program going, and thanks to Dylan Richardson for the support as well. So we'll be back here tomorrow for another edition of Forecast Lab. Hopefully we'll see you then. Hope you have a great Thursday evening, and we'll see you shortly. Bye-bye.